your brain screaming, you are nothing but a fraud as you're at the front of the room. I wanted to bring a topic to this week, the idea of being a fraud.
Ula's our Heart and Bones community manager, and she does so much stuff behind the scenes. Ula contributes so much to the Heart and Bones universe, so to speak. I'm really happy to be sharing this space with you and talking all things teaching.
So I met Brea years ago in Edmonton, and I was always amazed at the work she was putting out into the world, the good that she's doing through teaching yoga. And now being on the inside, I get to see the amount of people she supports through movement, her deep knowledge in anatomy. It's amazing to see her guiding not only students, but hundreds of teachers through the journey of becoming a yoga teacher. I have so much fun with her, and that's how this whole podcast came about, is because I think we are both passionate, spicy, fun people, and we have opinions. I wanted to bring a topic to this week, the idea of being a fraud, and your brain screaming, you are nothing but a fraud as you're at the front of the room. I wanted to bring that up because I think it is relevant not only for teaching yoga, I think it's relevant for life, triggering an imposter syndrome feeling. And the yoga world is really built around creating these, last time we talked about yoga gurus and you're putting your teachers on pedestals. It doesn't often leave room for vulnerability as a teacher when you're in front of the room. What do you think triggers imposter syndrome for most yoga teachers? Is it students, peers, or just even your own perfectionism?
All of the above. Yeah, and it's wild because, again, I've been teaching teachers to teach yoga for many years. And I have taught teachers around the world. And so it's a pretty common pattern I've seen. No matter where people are on this beautiful planet of ours, it seems to be a very common pattern for yoga teachers. There seems to be real imposter syndrome, doubts, fears that show up. And I have a few suspicions as to why that happens. When I try to ask these questions, why do we feel the way that we feel? So much of it, we got to look at the systems of the world that we're living in. We live in capitalism. We live in white supremacy. We live in the patriarchy. We live in all these systems of power, systems of oppression that teach us to have really unrealistic expectations on ourselves. The perfectionism really shows up, especially in that capitalistic culture too, where it's like you have to be an expert, you have to know everything, you have to refine in order to have validity. So that's my really short, big picture. The systems that we live in show up in our yoga practice. It is not separate. And then they show up in us and it's internalized. And so we show up as teachers going like, okay, I have to be good. I have to be really know everything and I have to help everybody. And then there's this other layer, I think, with yoga teachers. People, generally speaking, who decide to teach yoga are really great people, meaning that they want to help others. They found this practice of yoga and they're like, well, I felt really good. It's changed my life. I want to share this with other people. And so then that passion gets funneled into this beautiful impulse to share, to help others, which is beautiful. But then it gets a little bit twisted with these systems that are in, like that we have internalized in the world. Because now that okay, I want to help people. I want to help them feel good. I want to give them tools to all the things that yoga can give us. Then it starts to get twisted because then it's like, well, wait, I've only been doing yoga for X amount of years. Oh, wait, I only did a 200-hour yoga teacher training. And now I have to stand up in front of people and look, everybody's looking at me as if they know, expecting that I know what to do. And wait, I don't know. And then shouldn't a yoga teacher be all these things? And so it's like this huge layers. It's like a tornado of all this stuff that shows up. Plus, it's public speaking. And I don't think a lot of yoga teachers trainings acknowledge that you're speaking in front of people, regardless of what their perceived expectations are on them. Public speaking is scary. A room full of eyes on you expecting things is a lot. So that alone. So this is just a whole entire bunch of stuff that can lead to imposter syndrome, can lead to feeling like I'm not good enough.
Maybe I was just lucky. I worked with some really, really great people ages ago. I had these really great conversations. I was earlier on in my career, and one of the best things I took away, and I used it a lot in my teaching, was when someone asks you something you don't know, I literally will say, "Wow, great question. Let me look into that." Or and it just like it softened me so much. I'm maybe one of the lucky ones, or maybe I just felt imposter syndrome hard enough in other places that when it came to teaching yoga, I already knew I wasn't an expert, and I wasn't embarrassed by the fact that I was, not someone that knows the answer to everything. And I think that did set me up to be able to kind of say, build some boundaries as well around like what I'm willing to dive into with a student after class. The word I'm looking for is soften. I don't know why it keeps coming up in my brain, but I just like it let me be a softer teacher and a softer human to acknowledge that I am not the best at everything.
I love that that's the word that was coming up into your mind as you were doing that, because what shows up when we're feeling like an imposter? Like, let's all dramatic reenact what imposter feeling feels like in the body. Like, so if I'm feeling or like to me it's like my hand, I can't quite see my hands, but my hands start to sort of grip, my shoulders tighten, I'm like holding my belly, it's just like this, there's clenching, because we're fighting ourselves, we're the weight of expectations is showing up in our own body. And so I love that you said softening, because that is, because once you're just giving yourself permission to be Ula as Ula is, or me to be me, and all of us to be ourselves in our teaching the best that we can be, then okay, yeah, I'm softer. And then guess what? That vibe shows up in your students, that when you're holding a soft, receptive space as a teacher to the best that you can, because that's not always easy depending on where and how we are in our lives and what's going on. But that energy definitely shows up for the students, because we also know that the students in the class are probably showing up with their own stories. They probably feel like, oh, I'm not flexible enough. What am I even doing in this class? Oh, look at everybody else. Oh, I wish I was like that, right? We all are showing up with our stories, and that's showing up in the body. And that's why I feel the physical asana part of the yoga practice is so powerful, when we can bring the yoga wisdom into movement and recognize how it shows up in the body. And so holding a soft, receptive space as a teacher offers that, whether you use any of these words or not, you're holding that space, and it's going to give people permission to go, oh, right, I don't have to do Trikonasana the best ever.
Yeah. I feel like this must come up in the teacher training. I mean, you put X amount of people on the same, in the same room on the same call, each person bringing in their own life experiences. I mean, I'm so happy we're talking about this. This is the type of stuff I think that needs to be brought forward to make teaching and building a, sustainable teaching career possible. I think when it became difficult for me to teach is because I was siloed, or not as connected. And as it became more connected to other teachers, I began to have these honest conversations. And I know there's people out there who didn't have that. So I'm so grateful that we're, talking about this. And I know you're going to be continuing this conversation in the Inspired Yoga Teacher mentorship program. And then, of course, I'm sure this is part of the 200 and 300-hour training. Like, it must come up. It must.
Oh, this is okay. Well, here's a few things. So, as you're saying this, yes, number one, absolutely every time this comes up. And again, somebody who's been teaching for over 20 years, I have seen this come up in myself. I've seen this come up with my colleagues, my friends, and of course, in teacher trainings. And so, one of the very first things that we do and try to emphasize in the course is saying to people, it's one of our little like course outlines, is there are no mistakes. We, from the get-go, from the start, we say there are no mistakes, only opportunities for learning. Like, let's create spaces in this training where we can see the stuff in ourselves. But here's the funny thing, is easy to say, right? Yeah, right. And we're all like, yeah, there's no mistakes. Ooh, woo, yay. But this is a 6 or 7 month long training. And so the conditioning is a lot stronger than like 5 minutes on our first call being like, there's no mistakes, or like trying to reinforce that in subtle ways. And so halfway through the course, people start to get like that conditioning comes back, and then they're like, oh, I need to be good. And then I see it every single time we talk about the test at the end of the course, even though we say multiple times this is an open book test. You can't pass or fail it. What we're trying to do is use a test, an opportunity for you to see where your gaps in knowledge are. Like, this test is not going to be a reflection of you as an individual, your worth as a teacher. And also Kat and I, who my co-teacher Kat, her and I have both failed yoga tests. I failed anatomy tests in the past. I do not write tests good. In fact, one of my favorite examples of this was in university. I took a course called Social Deviance that I aced during the class. It was a sociology course. And so like the whole entire semester, it's like I had to stop putting my hand up because I was like, oh, I'm participating too much in a way. But my prof loved it. Long story short, we had the midterm test and it was a multiple choice and I bombed it, even though I knew this stuff. And my professor came up to me. She's like, what happened? And she actually bumped me up. I don't remember what my mark was, but she bumped me up from whatever it was to like an A-, because that was a very impactful experience for me, because it's like, oh, right, that's not me. I don't write tests good. Tests somehow, I can know the stuff, but push yeah, it doesn't work. And so her doing that for me and recognizing, this stuff, I know that you know this stuff, boom, bam, boom. So I do that in our training in that sense. It's like our testing and measuring model of school and society and culture is showing up in the programming. So my point is with all of this, though, is that by the time we start talking about the test, and I thought I've done this teacher training for 7 years, and it's literally consistent every single year. We say the word test, even though we've had months of telling everybody none of it matters. You're wonderful. We're just seeing where the gaps in our knowledge are, and people freak out every single time. So this is really in highlighting to me, there's that practice of knowing, oh, right, this test, it's cool, it's great. But then we say the word test and then we freak out because that's just how deep our conditioning is. So also, too, one of the other things that we've done in one of our recent live calls actually was we had everybody just name their fears. We're like, hey, put in the comments, you don't have to unmute because these are all Zoom calls because we're all around the world. And it was just like, let's talk about some of our like yoga teacher fears. And guess what happened? When we wrote those fears down, A, we all felt a lot better. And B, we all felt normal. Because it's like, oh, right, look how many other people feel like they're scared of messing up the class or scared of everybody hating them or whatever these fears are. So there's such power, and again, in like naming the fears, seeing the fears, knowing, like you mentioned, a community, we're all in this together. And so, yeah, it is a huge part of all my teaching. And anytime I work with teachers, this is like one of my foundations, because it floods everything else. It shows up. If we're not getting to that core wound, really, of perfectionism, the core wound of wanting to be great, needing to be good, liked, loved, all these things. If we don't see that in ourselves, we won't see it in the ways that it shows up in our teaching. And that, again, is our deeper practice of yoga.
I was just thinking, in our last episode, we mentioned the idea of professionally unprofessional, and it kind of popped up into my mind of it's very easy to slip into this, like, I have to be this professional, perfect person, which also, when you think about it, like, what, a professional yoga teacher? It's kind of an oxymoron. Like, you're like, I do expect you to know your stuff. I do expect you to care. I do expect you to be a student of life. I have these expectations, but I don't expect you to be a robot at the top of the class. I need you to be actually, looking at the students and responding to what's happening in the class. And I think that's where this idea, even, last time we were talking about, we want to be professionally unprofessional, however we said it on this podcast, but I kind of want to be that teacher at the top of the class as well, where I'm able to laugh in the moment because stuff happens. Like, imagine if your identity as a teacher is I'm a perfect professional, and I remember one time I fell from I was in a headstand and I fell on the floor, and I was a student, and I slapped the ground so hard in the middle of class, and the teacher looked over me and we all started laughing because I was fine, But if you were uptight and you're like, this went wrong, I didn't get like it wasn't that serious.
Good point. It's true. Yeah, it's none of it matters, right? But it all matters, but it doesn't matter. As you were talking, I was trying to think of it in my body of like, okay, so both as the teacher and as the student, if I'm a student going to a class where the teacher is really like, hello, I'm your professional yoga teacher, there's to me an energetic wall between them and me. And like healthy boundaries are good, of course. But what I'm talking about is more like if we can think about that for a second, it's like, or if I'm being that teacher, I'm putting up an energetic wall between me and the class because I'm hiding behind this like facade of, yes, hello. And like the voice changes. Like I can't do a normal voice. And it's the same with the online studio, actually, the Heart Bones online studio. That was always a very clear thing from the beginning of I knew there's a real difference between like, okay, all of our classes, and I'm sure we've all done online yoga classes, and there's other platforms out there where it's like in a professional studio with professional cameras and lighting and sound. And to me, the brand, the vibe, the intention behind Heart and Bones, and as an example of this, for us, it's like, well, we don't want to hide behind that professional facade. Yes, we are professional. Yes, we all know what we're doing. Again, like that's like professionally and professional. You got to keep the professionalism. But if it gets to the point where it feels like there's just a wall between us, I don't want that. That's not how I want my business to run. That's not how I want the classes online to feel. And that's not how I want to show up in any of the interactions and relationships that I have with people, whether it's in a professional or friendship way. And I think there's really longevity. You used the word sustainable before. I think there's a real sustainability and longevity in our relationships and our roles as teacher when we can still, yeah, I'm being professional, but I'm not being professional. Like, so I hope that's clear.
It's such a good point. Yeah. I just was thinking, wow, I hadn't even made that distinction quite yet. I was still thinking from the teacher point of view, but from a student point of view, I have also been to studios where the teacher at the top of the class was so distant. And I think that also set us up for that capital T teacher dynamic of the wannabe guru. And I think that is a slippery, dangerous slope to get onto because they become really difficult to approach. They become, I think it opens the door for like inappropriate, adjustments and things like that because it does set
Power
like
dynamics.
there's 100% a power dynamic, and I think showing a little bit of like imperfection or vulnerability or just like humanness. Like I'm not even saying you need to be vulnerable at the top of the class, but like just being human and normal, showing your own personality. I think you will attract the students that love your class. It happened to me like over time. The people that like the type of class I taught were the ones that showed up. And that in itself, I think, leads to your, need for perfection and imposter syndrome feel kind of goes away because they're showing up for the real you. And I think if you never ever let that show through, you probably will feel imposter syndrome for a long time because in fact you are impostering someone else.
Yes, completely. And again, my mind again always goes to, but there's our conditioning again, like it's probably scary. Some of us probably have a family of origin that it was scary to be your real self, or we were bullied at school, or what all these different things and conditions to. So it can be, I want to acknowledge and name that it can be very vulnerable to show up as your full self and your real self and know that some people won't like it. So it's not an easy process. That is our practice. And in fact, that's where, like, please, if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, that's me, then like also therapy. Talk about that with somebody. Talk about like why that conditioning of just like, it's really scary to be me. It's scary to show myself. And that's real. And we all probably have that on some form or another. I was bullied growing up, like I was just existing and these girls were all like, me, like, and that left scars. And that's probably why I'm even more passionate about it because that stuff doesn't feel good. And so I remember in my early, actually, I totally forgot about this. So thank you, Ula. It's like, yeah. And I think that did show up in my early days of teaching yoga because all of a sudden everybody's looking at you, you're in the front of the room, and that like deeper, quieter scar of like, well, I was just existing when I was a kid and not everybody liked me and they actually actively were mean and bullied me. So wait, why would I show up and totally let myself be me? And so for sure that showed up in my teaching in different ways. And thank you, therapy. Thank you, yoga. Thank you, life. Thank you, awareness. Again, it's never just these surface things. It's always just like, well, why am I this way? What are the causes and conditions?
Yeah, so I have a question for you because I know I'm saying showing up as your authentic self at the top of the class, but I say that knowing in the back of my mind there still is a bit of a persona, or maybe that's where the little bit of the professional part does step in because I also am ridiculous and goofy and all those things, but I can't be 100% that. So, like, what is the balance of feeling like myself while also respecting the fact that people are giving me their time and very much very likely their money for an experience of yoga?
Oh, Ulis, this is such a good question. Thank you for trying to yeah, we need to dissect that a little bit more because it's true. And I can hear our listeners, some of them going, well, exactly that.
Screaming.
Yeah, like, but wait, what does that actually mean? Because you're right. And I think, so right away I have a couple examples in my head. I remember I never went to this class in particular, but I do remember somebody telling me about going to somebody's class. And this was a very well-known teacher at the time in the yoga world. And they went to her class and she like came to the class and was like, hi. Like, so here's an example of not like being myself, her being herself, but not being professional. And I guess she was something like, again, this is a third hand story, but, showed up going like, hi, I've just got a lot of stuff going on in my life right now. I don't really want to be here doing this, but I'm showing up anyways because there's just all this stuff. And like, that's not professional. Like, yeah, TMI. Like, this is, come on. There has to be a point where we are all going to show up as teachers with stuff going on in our life. And I do remember years ago, a friend of mine, like, I don't know what was going on in my life, but something intense. And then like we were talking about it 5 minutes before the class. And then he was just like, went into the class. And then afterwards he remarked, he's like, wow, Brea, you just like went into like, because he knew, well, like, here it is. But then I went into teacher mode and it was not being fake. I wasn't denying the stuff going on in my life, but I also knew I had a role to perform in that moment. And in that moment, it was more performative than normal because I didn't want to bring my stuff coming, and nor should we at all. But nor should we also, it's a fine, delicate balance. So so there's that example. I went in and I taught and I was professional, and I might not have been as maybe relaxed. I might not have been my warm, goofy self that I normally am. And if there's not a lot of stuff going on as a teacher, but that's again where I love the words professionally, but unprofessional. There's ways to still be ourselves, but it's also back to what I said before, because it's not about us as teachers. Because here's the other thing. Have we all been to classes where the teacher has made it really about them, where they're like, not even to the point of the previous example, but a little bit of like, they throw in stuff about themselves that you're like, I'm not here. I don't care. I'm here to do my down dog and shavasana. Like, you're great, but I don't care about what's going on in your life.
Every student is bringing their life into that
Yes.
room. Every single person has a story and a reason for being there. And it can be as simple as, I just need to stretch because I run a lot, to I am experiencing a lot of difficulty in my life and I need this to be a safe place. And so for you as a teacher then to come in and also load your life onto theirs, I think is like asking a lot of people. I think it is a fine balance, and I don't know if we could define it perfectly.
Yeah, and I think go back in your head, because that's how my mind goes. It's like I can think of different examples of when it didn't work, where it was sort of like a personality show. Not, the person's not quite a guru, but it's like their like personality show. This is their, like, again, I have a classic story of a teacher teaching and literally not shutting up the entire class, including shavasana. And maybe they were saying yoga-y stuff like, okay, relax, but they just, I don't want to hear your voice anymore. You have talked nonstop. But maybe somebody else in that class loved it. I don't advocate talking nonstop, by the way, but right. And so maybe that worked for somebody else because they could kind of tune it out, and that was like they needed the white noise, and then maybe that became white noise. But it's a fine line. It's going to be individual for each of us. It's going to be different for each group that we teach. When you're a sub in a really popular class at a yoga studio, yeah, you're probably going to put on a little bit more of a persona because you know that people love their regular teacher. You're in a new space. You're not going to be as comfortable, and that's perfectly okay. So yeah, I wish we had a quick and easy answer on that, but I think that's a good point to talk about. Like, think in your mind, who are the best teachers that I've had and why? Why have I enjoyed their classes? What did I do? Like, what did they do differently? Why did I keep coming back? And not just like, oh, they were a good teacher, but I highly recommend making this an exercise for yourself. Write it down and get as detailed as possible. What was it specifically? Was it the words that they used, how they used, the way they engaged with people or not engaged, and all this? And then maybe come up with, because I'm sure we've all had at least one or two not so great teachers, and then go, well, why weren't they great? Why didn't I like that class? Was it about that class? Not necessarily about that person, because let's not make it personal, but what were they doing that wasn't quite gelling with me? And I think when we can get as detailed on both sides, it's going to be pretty informative, and that's going to be a really lovely way for us to answer that question a little bit better for
I think we should leave it
ourselves.
on there, but I will say what popped into my mind, which was, it's so funny we're talking about feeling imposter syndrome. And when you asked that question, the first thing that popped in my head was my favorite teachers were the one that left room for the practice of yoga, and it wasn't about them.
There it is. Mic drop. Exactly. There it is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it wasn't about them. So if you love this conversation, we have more episodes coming, more stories and behind the scenes. We're going to touch on marketing and brand and teaching and all things yoga. So if you love this, you're going to love the mentorship program that Brea will be leading as well. You lead a 200 and 300 hour yoga teacher training every year. I'm going to leave the links in the description below. Yes, online. So anyone can access it. It's a global program. I'm so excited for it.
Yeah. Thank you, Ula.
Thank you, Brea.